Tonight we walk into a warm kitchen, where flour dust floats in the glow of candlelight, and the air hums with the sound of a wooden spoon striking against a bowl. You lean in and catch the yeasty sweetness of dough rising, that quiet alchemy of grain, water, and patience. A monk in a simple robe wipes his brow, rolls out a strip of dough, and with practiced ease twists it into a loop with 3 empty spaces. It looks a little like folded arms at prayer, though, if we're honest, it also looks like a snack you probably won't survive if you drop into boiling water too soon. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through the hush of an early medieval monastery, and everywhere is discipline, chanting, fasting, strict schedules of prayer. Yet here, in the monastery kitchen, is a flash of generosity. The story goes that around the early 7th century, a monk decides to reward children who memorize their prayers. He takes leftover dough, twists it into a knot, and bakes it golden brown. He calls it preciola, meaning little rewards. That's the mainstream story. The pretzel begins as a snack for the pious. But of course, history rarely ties itself into such a neat knot. Other tales whisper of Italian monks crafting bread in loops to represent arms crossed over the chest, a posture of humility. Some scholars even argue that the pretzel may not have been invented in a monastery at all, but in bustling Roman bakeries, where breads shaped into rings were already common. Historians still argue whether the pretzel's true birthplace was a cloistered abbey or a noisy marketplace. Either way, you can practically hear the crunch echoing through time. The kitchen smells of toasty grain and wood smoke, and you picture children biting into warm twists, crumbs dusting their tunics. The monks smile. Maybe they don't smile often, but bread has that effect. Bread is life, bread is survival, and sometimes bread is joy disguised as prayer practice. The act of shaping dough into something special carries its own symbolism. Even if the children don't care about theology, they just want another bite. One quirky tidbit slips through the cracks of history. Some monasteries may have flavored their pretzels with herbs like dill or even dipped them in honey, which means those solemn monks weren't above sweet tooth experiments. Imagine a monk sneaking into the pantry at midnight, whispering, "One more for quality control." That's the kind of detail history textbooks skip, but you know someone did it. You wander outside, the night crisp against your face, and you can almost hear the bell tower striking the hour. Monks shuffle to prayer, and the children, with their pretzels in hand, recite their memorized lines. You sense how food, faith, and discipline intertwine here. Bread becomes more than calories. It becomes memory, ritual, and a tangible reminder of reward after effort. And then there's the shape itself. Twisting dough into that knot is oddly satisfying, even meditative. You pinch the ends, cross them over, tuck them down. The result isn't just efficient baking, it's a symbol, one that echoes through centuries of European culture. The 3 spaces in the pretzel loop are said to represent the Trinity for Christians, but in another light they might represent family, community, and sustenance. Or maybe they represent nothing at all except a good way to bake dough evenly. Pretzels hold their mysteries like knots that never quite untangle. You sit with that thought for a moment, the crackle of the oven fire warming your cheeks. Somewhere in the dark corridor beyond, a monk coughs, and the sound reverberates against the stone walls. This kitchen, with its humble twist of dough, is quietly making history. And you, watching it unfold, feel the weight of how small inventions ripple outward. That one monk's decision to fold dough differently will spiral into markets, festivals, royal courts, and baseball stadiums. All from this quiet room, with its flour-dusted table and humble little reward. The funny thing is, if you showed up here today with a soft pretzel dripping with nacho cheese, the monks would probably excommunicate you on the spot. Yet, who knows, after a few bites, maybe they'd forgive you. After all, The story of food is always one of change, adaptation, and appetite. You chew slowly, imaginary crumbs dissolving on your tongue, and glance at the twisted shape again. You think about how many hands will roll dough into that form across centuries. The monk doesn't know it, but his kitchen just gave the world one of its most enduring snacks. And you, lucky you, are there at the very beginning, with the warm scent of bread rising all around. You step from the cloister into the jostling world of medieval town life, and the air instantly shifts from solemn incense to the pungent mix of horses, sweat, and fried dough. Cobblestones scrape under your shoes as you follow the echo of merchants shouting their wares, leather, wool, and somewhere between the tannery and the fishmonger, the unmistakable scent of warm, salty pretzels wafts through the crowd. You drift closer, and there, under a striped awning, a baker balances a wooden tray stacked with golden knots. The steam curls upward, and you realize you've stumbled into the earliest version of street food, pretzels, sold hot, cheap, and perfectly portable. In these cramped marketplaces, food needs to be quick. You imagine townsfolk rushing between guild halls and churches, grabbing a pretzel the way you might grab a coffee on the go. Unlike heavy loaves of bread that take knives and benches to manage, pretzels are ready to eat in your hand. That portability is what gives them an edge in this noisy, chaotic economy. The mainstream historical fact is this: by the High Middle Ages, pretzels were being baked not only in monasteries but also in village bakeries, where they became a staple of fairs and markets. They were especially popular in German-speaking lands, where the Pretzel was cheap enough for commoners yet symbolic enough to appear at feasts. Bakers learned to twist dough fast, producing dozens an hour, ready for passing crowds. But there's a quirkier side to this street snack. Some accounts suggest that pretzels doubled as a form of edible currency at times. Bakers would hand them out during festivals, not only to feed hungry revelers but also to signal generosity and civic pride. It's as if tossing free pretzels into a medieval crowd was the 14th century version of corporate sponsorship. Instead of billboards, you got a hot pretzel in hand. And then there's the open question historians love to wrangle: were pretzels originally boiled before baking in these marketplaces? Some argue yes, pointing to early Germanic traditions of dipping dough in lye or salted water to create that shiny crust. Others insist the earliest pretzels were just baked straight, more like chewy rolls with a twist. Historians still argue whether the true pretzel as we know it came directly from these markets or evolved later in specialized baker guilds. Either way, the scent in this street is enough to keep your stomach grumbling. You sidestep a cart rattling past and notice a young boy balancing 3 pretzels looped through a string, like edible jewelry. He grins, probably not realizing his eating history with every bite. A woman nearby dips hers into mustard, a spicy kick against the salted crust. Somewhere, a troubadour plucks at a lute, and the mingling smells of ale and fresh bread swirl together into what feels like a medieval food court. It's not just commoners enjoying this cheap snack. Wealthier townsfolk often bought pretzels as well, partly because of their symbolic shape. Some city councils even regulated pretzel prices, worried that bakers might hike costs unfairly on festival days. Imagine lawmakers today trying to cap the price of stadium nachos, same energy, different century. You linger at the edge of a stall, watching the baker toss dough ropes onto his table, twist, flip, and lay them in neat rows. His fingers move like a magician's, faster than you can follow. He sprinkles coarse salt on top, big crystals that catch the morning light. The oven roars behind him, flames licking the stone walls. He barely glances up as coins clink into his basket and pretzels vanish into eager hands. Some quirky tidbits suggest that pretzels weren't always salted in these markets. Sugar was occasionally sprinkled instead, turning them into early sweet treats. Children would line up for the sugared ones, while adults stuck to the salty kind, often paired with ale. That means pretzels might secretly be the great-grandparent of the modern donut just as much as of the modern snack food. You bite into one in your imagination, the outside firm, shiny, slightly bitter from the lye bath if indeed this baker uses it, while the inside is soft and warm, steam billowing out with each tear. The flavor sticks to your tongue, simple yet addictive. You feel crumbs cling to your lips, and you laugh quietly at yourself, knowing you'd never survive medieval dentistry if one got stuck between your teeth. As you stroll further down the street, you notice baskets of pretzels hung outside bakeries, not just as goods for sale but as signs of what's inside. The pretzel shape becomes a logo centuries before logos are a thing. Even today, in parts of Europe, wooden pretzels hang outside bakeries as a signpost for bread. That tiny loop, invented in some quiet kitchen, now dangles in the noisy heart of city life, advertising nourishment to all who pass. You pause, belly full and fingers dusted with salt. Around you, life bustles. Merchants bicker, dogs chase scraps, and children chase each other. Yet amid the noise, that humble pretzel keeps its quiet charm. It is at once simple food and powerful symbol, surviving because it fits perfectly into the hand of anyone passing through these streets. You drift further into town, past the clang of blacksmiths and the chants of traders, until a church bell tolls above the rooftops. Its heavy ring marks not just the hour but the rhythm of medieval life, when to work, when to rest, and especially when to fast. You notice households tightening their belts during Lent, that solemn stretch of 40 days where meat, eggs, and dairy are banned. But no one forbids flour, water, and salt. And so, into the quiet kitchens of this season, the pretzel makes its move. You watch a baker knead a stiff, plain dough. No butter, no milk, no fat of any kind, just the bare essentials. He rolls the rope, twists it into the familiar knot, and drops it into the oven. Out comes a crisp, chewy pretzel, perfectly acceptable for Lent. While other foods are cast aside as sinful indulgences, pretzels slip through the loophole. It's clever, really, a bread that doesn't break the rules yet still fills the stomach. The mainstream fact is clear: pretzels became tied to the Lenten season in Europe by the Middle Ages, often eaten daily as a replacement for richer breads. They were not just snacks but survival food, dense with carbohydrates and comforting in their ritual shape. Paintings from the 15th century even depict bowls of pretzels alongside fish on Lenten tables. They were everywhere, on the poor man's plate and the nobleman's platter alike. Yet the quirky tidbits make you grin. Some villages baked pretzels in giant sizes specifically for Lent festivals, loops big enough to hang around your neck. Children would parade with them, munching piece by piece until nothing but crumbs remained. Others hid coins inside baked pretzels as a kind of reward for enduring the fasting season, turning them into edible surprises, basically medieval Happy Meal toys. And then there's the scholarly wrinkle. Historians still argue whether the pretzel was designed for Lent from the start or just happened to fit the rules perfectly and only later gained the association. Was the monk in his abbey deliberately inventing a fasting bread, or was it sheer coincidence that his flour water salt creation became the poster child for Lent? The debate knots itself tighter than the dough. You slip into a dim dining hall where candles sputter against stone walls. Long tables stretch with bowls of fish stew, boiled turnips, and stacks of pretzels. The air smells faintly of brine and smoke, but then the warm aroma of baked dough cuts through, a little comfort amid austerity. People chew slowly, eyes down, muttering prayers between bites. You feel the weight of discipline here, yet you can't help thinking how the crunch of a pretzel must have been the highlight of these otherwise dreary meals. Someone passes you a small pretzel, the salt rough on your tongue, the chew dense but satisfying. You notice how the shape matters even more in this setting. With arms folded in prayer, the pretzel becomes both food and devotion, a bread that seems to bow its head along with the worshippers. It's almost funny, something so ordinary becoming a theological mascot. But that's what makes history delicious. Bread becomes belief, and belief becomes tradition. On your way out of the hall, you notice children sneaking bites, crumbs scattering across their laps. For them, the pretzel isn't a symbol, it's just something to chew while waiting for the priest to stop talking. And isn't that always the way? Adults load objects with meaning while kids just enjoy the snack. In another corner of Europe, bakers experiment further. You overhear a rumor of pretzels being dipped in beer instead of water before baking, giving them a stronger flavor. Were these still Lenten approved? Probably not, but you can imagine townsfolk arguing about it, some insisting it broke the rules, others claiming the alcohol baked off. The loopholes within the loophole. As you step back into the street, you feel the season's weight, less meat sizzling on spits, fewer dairy smells drifting from kitchens. But you also feel the resilience of people finding joy in the small things. A pretzel in hand, even plain and unsalted, becomes more than bread. It becomes endurance, tradition, and perhaps even a little rebellion, a way to trick the stomach into thinking it's indulging, when in truth, it's just following the rules. And the funniest part, the pretzel, born of restriction, will later become the very image of indulgence at fairs and festivals. But for now, during Lent, it remains the quiet hero of the table, the little twist that makes fasting bearable. You walk out from the dim austerity of Lent into a square where the air feels lighter, where bells chime not in warning but in celebration. Here, pretzels shift from being a loophole snack to something much more symbolic. You see them everywhere, tied to garlands, stacked in baskets, even dangling from ribbons at weddings. The twist isn't just dough anymore, it's become a shape people read meaning into, the way you might see a heart today and instantly think of love. The mainstream fact is simple enough. Pretzels took on layers of symbolism in medieval Europe. Their 3 holes were said to represent the Holy Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. But symbolism rarely stays in its original lane. Soon, pretzels were also read as signs of unity, infinity, or even good luck. A single shape, infinitely interpreted. You glance at a young couple clasping hands beneath a doorway. Above them, pretzels hang like charms, meant to bless their marriage with prosperity and harmony. This isn't a one-off. Throughout the 16th century, pretzels were often woven into wedding rituals, gifted to couples the way champagne or cake might appear today. Some regions even believed that breaking a pretzel together, like a wishbone, could predict who would be the dominant partner in the marriage. You imagine the awkward silence if both partners snapped off the same-sized piece. Yet symbolism wasn't only about romance. Soldiers carried pretzels into battle as tokens of protection. Parents tucked them into children's satchels as symbols of safety. And bakers proudly hung them on their doors not only to advertise but to signal abundance and blessing. That twisted knot was like an ancient emoji loaded with meanings, read differently depending on who looked at it. But here's a quirky tidbit that makes you pause. In some alpine villages, pretzels weren't just eaten or gifted, they were literally worn. People strung them on necklaces or hats, especially during festivals, as if to say, "Look at me, I'm both fashionable and snackable." Imagine showing up to a party today with Doritos dangling from your ears. Absurd? Yes. Delicious? Also yes. Historians still argue whether the pretzel's 3 holes were deliberately designed to symbolize the Trinity or if that interpretation was retrofitted later by church authorities eager to baptize every popular custom. Maybe monks twisted the dough simply because it looked neat, and only centuries later did theologians nod wisely and declare, "Ah yes, the 3-in-1." The debate continues, and you find yourself smiling at the thought of medieval bakers rolling their eyes at overzealous priests. The air in the square is rich with smells, roasted meats from vendors, sweet wine splashed into mugs, and, of course, fresh pretzels, their salt crystals catching the lamplight. Children dart between the stalls, chasing each other with pretzels clutched like trophies. Older folks linger near the church steps, holding pretzels in pairs as if testing the wishbone marriage trick themselves. Everywhere you look, dough has become metaphor. You pause near a fountain where a priest blesses a basket of pretzels before handing them to townsfolk. The crowd accepts them not as plain food but as holy bread, a reminder of faith intertwined with daily sustenance. Yet in the very next stall, a tipsy merchant slaps a pretzel on his friend's head like a crown, both men laughing so hard they nearly drop their mugs. Sacred and silly, side by side, that's how symbolism works. You tear into a pretzel yourself, and as the crust cracks beneath your teeth, you wonder if you're tasting love, luck, or piety, or maybe just salt. The human tendency to see meaning in shapes is as old as cave paintings, and here you are, biting into a knot that holds centuries of stories in its folds. And, just between us, if you'd been a medieval child, you probably wouldn't have cared whether the pretzel stood for the Trinity or eternal unity. You would have been more interested in whether your sibling got the bigger half. Some things, it seems, never change. The night deepens, lanterns glow, and the square hums with laughter and music. Pretzels dangle above doorways, tucked into baskets, shared between lovers. You walk on, crumbs trailing from your sleeve, and realize you're following not just a food but a symbol that has already wrapped itself into the culture tighter than dough around a baker's thumb. You leave the lantern-lit square and wander into the echoing halls of a noble household, where the scent of roasted venison and spiced wine mixes with something surprisingly familiar, the yeasty warmth of freshly baked pretzels. Tonight, however, they aren't the humble hand-sized snacks you saw in the market. These pretzels gleam, literally. They're gilded with edible gold leaf, stacked high on silver platters, shimmering under torchlight as if they've been forged rather than baked. The mainstream fact is this: by the late medieval and early Renaissance periods, pretzels had climbed the social ladder. They weren't just street food for commoners or prayer rewards for children, they became symbols of wealth and prosperity, often displayed at royal banquets. Some noble weddings even featured intricate pretzel trees, towering displays of pretzels threaded on branches or skewers, meant to impress guests and shower blessings on the new couple. You picture yourself at one of these feasts. The table groans under roasted boar, sugared fruits, pies filled with spiced fish, and in between, golden pretzels. Servants move swiftly, refilling goblets, straightening tablecloths, and offering trays of pretzels like jewels on display. You pick one up. The surface sparkles faintly with gold dust. Bite into it, and the taste is ordinary bread, though if you close your eyes, you can almost convince yourself you've eaten riches. Here's the quirky twist. In some courts, bakers weren't just cooks, they were performers. They shaped pretzels into elaborate designs for weddings and coronations, double knots, braided crowns, even pretzel sculptures of animals. Guests gasped, snapped off pieces, and chewed while marveling at the artistry. In this sense, pretzels were the medieval version of edible centerpieces, think wedding cakes, only crunchier and less likely to collapse under their own frosting. Of course, historians still argue whether gilded pretzels were genuinely common at noble tables or rare spectacles limited to the richest courts. Was every baron flaunting golden dough, or were these anecdotes inflated by chroniclers who loved a good culinary exaggeration? The records are hazy, and the debate lingers like the aftertaste of salt. At one feast you pass through in your imagination, a duke raises a gilded pretzel and declares it a symbol of unity in his realm. The crowd cheers, crumbs fly, and you can't help but notice the irony. The very same snack being munched in cobblestone markets is here dressed in gold and praised as a royal metaphor. Food has always been a shapeshifter, equally at home in the hands of a peasant child or in the palm of a prince. The noise of the hall grows, music from fiddles and lutes bouncing off the high stone walls. Servants carry trays of soft, oversized pretzels glazed with honey, a sweet version reserved for honored guests. You see ladies delicately tearing off small bites, careful not to drop syrup on their brocade gowns. Across the table, knights tear into theirs with less restraint, honey dripping down their chins. Different classes, same pretzel, different messes. One servant whispers a superstition: gilded pretzels given at weddings ensure wealth and fertility. Another insists they should always be eaten in pairs, one for the bride, one for the groom. And tucked into the chatter is a quieter belief that pretzels at feasts can bless not just the couple but the entire household, ensuring peace and abundance. It's as if these golden twists carry magic along with their crunch. You sit back, nibbling another piece, and wonder how the monks of centuries past would react to this gilded spectacle. Their humble little rewards have been transformed into edible status symbols. Maybe they'd laugh. Maybe they'd scowl. Or maybe, just maybe, they'd sneak one into their sleeves for later, gold leaf and all. The music swells, dancers whirl, and pretzels continue to circulate on trays. A child slips one under the table, feeding crumbs to the dogs at her feet. A nobleman pockets two, planning to nibble them later on the hunt. And you, watching it all, realize that the pretzel has now traveled beyond hunger or fasting. It has become theater, food as performance, food as wealth, food as meaning. The night stretches on, golden flakes glimmering in candlelight, laughter echoing off stone walls, and the pretzel, in all its twisted simplicity, stands proudly among jewels and goblets. You can almost hear the dough itself whisper, "See? I clean up nicely." You slip out of the banquet hall, brushing gold crumbs from your sleeves, and the night air greets you cool and damp. Yet the streets don't sleep. In doorways and windows, you notice something odd: pretzels hung like talismans, dangling from nails or tied with string. They sway gently in the breeze, almost like watchful eyes. The bread has left the feast and the fast and now enters the strange world of superstition. The mainstream fact is that in several parts of Europe, especially in the German-speaking regions, pretzels became protective charms. Hung on doors or walls, they were believed to ward off storms, lightning, and even disease. The shape was thought to have power beyond symbolism. It was a literal knot against misfortune. Pretzels became more than snacks. They were shields baked in ovens. You wander past one cottage where a family has woven pretzels into a garland over the doorway. Rain begins to drizzle, and the pretzels glisten, hardening in the damp night air. The father explains that the bread will keep storms away. Does it work? Who knows? But in a world where plagues strike and weather ruins crops, you cling to any charm that offers hope. Now for the quirky detail. Some households didn't just hang pretzels on doors. They dunked them in wine on Good Friday and fed them to animals, believing this ritual would prevent sickness in livestock. Imagine cows chomping on soggy pretzels while their owners nod solemnly. Strange? Yes. But when your livelihood depends on healthy animals, even soggy bread becomes sacred. And then comes the scholarly puzzle. Historians still argue whether these superstitious uses of pretzels were deeply rooted in Christian symbolism or simply borrowed from much older pagan practices of not magic. Were the twisted loops meant as a Christian blessing, or were they echoing ancient charms long before monks gave the bread a holy stamp? No one can quite agree, and the knot of debate stays tangled. You pass a tavern where villagers sit with mugs of ale, trading stories about pretzels that saved houses from lightning strikes. One swears his grandmother's cottage was spared because a pretzel garland hung on the rafters. Another laughs and says it only works if the pretzel is baked on Easter morning. These rules shift like smoke, but everyone seems convinced of one version or another. The smell of roasting barley and wood smoke mixes with the faint, comforting aroma of bread. You sit at a bench, biting into a pretzel still warm from the hearth. As you chew, you notice the way the salt cuts through the musty air, almost like a charm of its own. Maybe the superstition isn't about storms at all, maybe it's about the reassurance of something warm and familiar in uncertain times. A child skips past, carrying a pretzel on a string like a necklace. You chuckle at the sight, but then remember what you heard earlier. Sometimes children wore pretzels as protective amulets against sickness. Parents hoped the bread would absorb illness before it reached the child. It's both touching and slightly absurd, yet you realize it's not so different from people today wearing Lucky Charms or bracelets. Humanity always twists hope into tangible shapes. Later, as thunder rumbles on the horizon, you see a baker nailing a fresh pretzel above his shop door. The gesture is both practical and mystical. Advertise bread, and keep lightning away at the same time. You smile at the efficiency of it all. And when the storm finally rolls in, you stand beneath one of those dangling pretzels, half expecting it to glow with protective power. The rain pours, the wind howls, yet the little knot of dough hangs steady, defiant, as if daring the storm to try. And maybe that's the point. Whether or not the pretzel actually wards off disaster, it gives people something to believe in, something to anchor their fear. You take another bite and taste not just flour and salt but centuries of human hope twisted into every loop. The storm passes, and the road pulls you southward, winding through rugged mountains where the air is crisp and thin. Snow lingers on the peaks, and goat bells jingle in the distance. Here, in the shadow of the Alps, pretzels take on another life, carried across borders, shaped by competing bakers, and fiercely claimed as ours by every valley you wander into. The mainstream fact is this: pretzels became deeply embedded in Alpine culture, especially in what are now Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. By the late Middle Ages, bakers across the region were producing pretzels as their signature item, each with slightly different twists, sizes, and recipes. In Munich, Salzburg, and Basel, pretzels became so common that travelers could find them at nearly every inn or roadside stall. The bread wasn't just food, it was an identity marker, a proud badge of local tradition. You walk into one town where bakers boast that their pretzels are the original, thicker and chewier than the frail ones in the next valley. Just over the pass, another village insists theirs are the true heirs, lighter and crispier, the real deal. The rivalry feels less like culinary debate and more like sports fandom. Imagine towns today arguing over who invented pizza and threatening duels over crust thickness. That's the Alpine pretzel wars in miniature. Quirky traditions bloom here too. In some mountain villages, bakers crafted pretzels the size of wagon wheels for festivals. These colossal breads were hung in the town square, and pieces were broken off and shared among the community. A giant pretzel dangling in the open air, half symbol, half snack buffet. Children scrambled for the biggest chunks while adults claimed it brought luck for the harvest. The pretzel wasn't just food, it was the centerpiece of communal life. And yet, historians still argue whether the pretzel actually originated here in the Alps. Some point to early documents from Bavaria, others to monasteries in northern Italy. Was the first true pretzel baked in a German abbey, an Italian convent, or perhaps in both, springing up independently? The arguments loop endlessly, knotted tighter than the dough itself. Each region waves its own flag, declaring, "The pretzel is ours." You trudge higher along a mountain path, the crunch of snow underfoot, and come upon a wayside inn. Inside, the warmth of a hearth greets you, and on the counter sits a basket of thick, glossy pretzels. A traveler dips his into a bowl of melted cheese, another pairs hers with dark beer. You take one, and the crust shatters with a satisfying snap, the inside dense and hearty, perfect fuel for crossing cold passes. It's easy to see why these breads spread so well here. They're portable, filling, and last longer than most baked goods. The innkeeper, proud of his craft, insists his family's pretzel recipe dates back centuries, passed down like a sacred relic. He leans closer, whispers that their secret lies in dipping the dough in lye before baking. The sharp treatment gives the crust its distinctive sheen and flavor. You nod, chewing thoughtfully, trying not to think about how dangerous lye actually is. But somehow, the risk only adds to the mystique. You leave the inn, hiking down into another valley, and notice pretzels displayed in shop windows, hung from poles, carried in baskets slung on shoulders. Each town seems to twist its dough slightly differently, thicker arms here, thinner loops there. It's like walking through a gallery of edible sculptures, each declaring regional pride. And the funny part? To your modern taste buds, they all just taste like pretzels. Still, there's something charming about the rivalry, something very human. The same twisted bread that started as a monk's treat now fuels alpine debates and mountain festivals. You take another bite of the sturdy bread, brushing salt from your lips, and think about how geography shapes tradition. High passes, snowy winters, and close-knit villages all helped make the pretzel more than food. Here in the Alps, it's heritage, identity, and perhaps a little competitive bragging, baked golden and warm. You descend into a bustling medieval city, its gates creaking open to reveal narrow streets crowded with stalls, bells ringing, and the faint, smoky tang of ovens at work. But these aren't ordinary bakers tossing dough for whoever passes by. No, this is the guarded world of guilds, where bread is power, and pretzels are closely policed treasures of trade. The mainstream fact is that baker guilds across Europe, especially in German regions, rose to prominence by the late Middle Ages. These guilds set the rules: who could bake, what could be sold, and at what price. Pretzels, being wildly popular, became their pride and their battleground. Recipes were tightly guarded, apprenticeships stretched for years, and breaking the rules could land a baker in serious trouble, sometimes even banishment from the city. You push open the heavy wooden door of a guild hall and step into a smoky chamber lit by torches. A long table sits in the center, covered in scrolls and wax seals. Masters argue about oven rights, salt supplies, and the exact thickness a pretzel arm should be. The atmosphere feels less like a kitchen and more like a courtroom. And you, nibbling the corner of a stolen pretzel, realize you're watching a society where dough is politics. But then come the quirky details. Some guilds demanded that every pretzel be twisted in precisely 3 motions, a rule enforced with fines if a baker cut corners. Others required apprentices to craft giant pretzels as proof of their skill before earning full membership. Imagine being a nervous teenager, sweating over a pretzel the size of a wagon wheel while stern masters nod or scowl. And yes, some unlucky bakers who failed were demoted back to grinding flour. Talk about a salty career setback. And, of course, the debates never ended. Historians still argue whether guild rivalries were genuinely about protecting craftsmanship or mostly about controlling markets and squeezing out competitors. Did they fight for pretzel purity, or was it all about profits? The documents are clear on rules but fuzzy on motives, leaving scholars looping endlessly like dough ropes. You wander into a bakery where an apprentice, face streaked with flour, practices the twist again and again. His fingers fumble, and the loop collapses into a lump. The master growls, snatches it away, and demonstrates the swift cross-and-tuck motion. In seconds, the dough transforms into the familiar knot. Watching it is oddly hypnotic, like watching someone tie a shoelace you've seen 1,000 times but still can't quite copy. On the street outside, rival bakers advertise their superiority in subtle ways. One paints his shop sign with a pretzel larger than life, daring others to challenge him. Another hangs real pretzels from his doorway, so massive they sag under their own weight. Competition doesn't just live in guild halls, it spills into daily life, each pretzel a declaration of mastery. Yet, amid the strict rules and rivalries, the community benefits too. Pretzels are affordable, reliable, and everywhere, feeding workers, travelers, and families alike. The guilds may fight over recipes, but the people reap the reward: consistent, delicious bread that becomes part of the rhythm of city life. You pause to bite into a warm pretzel handed over by a proud apprentice. The crust snaps, the inside is airy, and the salt lingers on your lips. Around you, bakers shout prices, masters bark orders, and apprentices sigh under the weight of flour sacks. It's chaotic, but it's also strangely comforting. Pretzels here aren't just food, they're symbols of craft, pride, and rivalry baked into every twist. As you walk away, a guild meeting bell tolls, summoning bakers to another round of debate. You chuckle, imagining them arguing for hours over whether a pretzel should be dipped twice or thrice before baking. Some things never change. Humans can turn even snacks into battlefields. The clang of the guild hall fades, and the air fills with the creak of wooden hulls and the snap of sails. You find yourself on the deck of a ship rolling across the Atlantic, the salty wind whipping your face and the smell of tar, damp ropes, and salted provisions sinking into your clothes. Barrels line the hold, and inside many of them are not fish or grain but pretzels, hard, dry, and meant to last the long crossing. The mainstream fact here is that pretzels, especially the harder baked variety, became practical provisions for sailors and colonists during the Age of Exploration. Unlike soft breads that spoiled quickly, pretzels could be stored for weeks or even months if kept dry. By the 17th century, ships leaving from German ports often carried barrels filled with these salted knots, making them one of the earliest portable snack foods to travel oceans. You watch sailors pull out a handful from a barrel, gnawing on the rock-hard twists while laughing around the mast. They don't dip them in mustard or beer, there's no luxury here. They just crunch the salty loops to keep their jaws busy and their stomachs quiet. Pretzels become less about taste and more about survival, the same way sailors once chewed on ship's biscuit. The difference? Pretzels at least had the dignity of a twist. Now for the quirky detail. Some captains believed pretzels brought luck at sea. They were tossed into waves during storms as offerings, or nailed to masts as charms against sinking. Imagine being in the middle of a hurricane, the crew desperately hurling pretzels overboard like crunchy life preservers. It sounds ridiculous, but when you're staring down death by drowning, even a salty knot of dough feels like a lifeline. Historians still argue whether pretzels reached the New World mainly through these sea voyages or whether they spread later through land-based migration and trade. Did barrels of pretzels really line colonial pantries from day one, or is that a romanticized vision of German heritage retrofitted into the past? The records are spotty, and so the debate sails on, unanchored. The ship creaks beneath your feet as a sailor offers you a piece. You bite down and nearly chip a tooth. The pretzel is dense, dry, and brutally salty, but strangely satisfying. It holds the flavor of survival, of journeys undertaken with nothing but faith in wood, rope, and bread. You chew slowly, staring out at endless gray waves, and feel the connection between this little twist and the vast gamble of leaving one world for another. Below deck, you peek at a barrel carefully sealed with pitch. Inside, the pretzels are smaller, bite-sized, and tougher than the ones you've known before. These aren't for celebration or superstition, they're rations, measured carefully, handed out sparingly. A sailor jokes that one barrel of pretzels has outlasted 3 barrels of apples, which turned to mush weeks ago. In the hierarchy of shipboard cuisine, pretzels sit comfortably above rot and below rum. At night, when the sea grows calm, sailors gather with mugs of thin beer and soften their pretzels by dipping them into the liquid. The salt dissolves, the crust loosens, and suddenly the hard twist becomes edible again. You can't help but laugh, it's the original beer and pretzel combo, born not out of luxury at a tavern but out of necessity on the deck of a creaking ship. The stars wheel overhead, the sails flap, and the barrels creak as the voyage stretches on. Pretzels remain steady companions, filling bellies, calming nerves, and even serving as talismans against the unknown. You lean against the railing, crumbs falling into the sea, and think how strange it is that such a humble food could find itself crossing oceans, linking continents, and surviving the salty spray of centuries. You step off the ship into a dusty colonial village in Pennsylvania, the smell of fresh-cut timber mixing with the tang of hearth smoke. Children run past, chasing chickens, their laughter bouncing off clapboard houses. And somewhere nearby, the comforting aroma of baking pretzels wraps around you like a warm blanket. Here in the New World, German immigrants are making their mark, and the pretzel has crossed the ocean to become a crunchy, salty emblem of home. The mainstream fact is that German settlers in Pennsylvania, arriving in the 17th and 18th centuries, brought their pretzel recipes with them. These were mostly hard pretzels at first, baked to last weeks without refrigeration. Families baked them in home ovens, sold them at local markets, and eventually, entire villages became known for pretzel production. Pennsylvania remains the epicenter of American pretzels to this day, a legacy stretching back over 300 years. You wander into a village bakery where a family kneads dough on a rough wooden table. Children peep through the window, marveling as loops form and glisten with egg wash. You notice the rhythm is familial, almost meditative: roll, twist, tuck, bake. Each pretzel carries not just flour and water but heritage, a tangible connection to the old country. Quirky tidbits abound. Some settlers baked giant pretzels to hang from poles during festivals, while others experimented with unusual flavors like molasses, pumpkin, or even hot spices imported from the Caribbean. Imagine colonial Pennsylvania with spicy pretzels lining the streets. Not quite your modern snack aisle, but inventive nonetheless. And yet, historians still argue whether pretzels were immediately widespread in colonial America or primarily confined to German enclaves. Did the snack leap quickly into broader colonial society, or was it a niche, ethnic food for decades before catching on? The answer isn't clear, and that uncertainty only deepens the story of adaptation. You step outside the bakery, carrying a warm pretzel, its coarse salt scratching your fingers. Neighbors nod, some exchange recipes, and someone mentions that pretzels are often used as a welcome gift for visitors. You realize these breads have evolved into social instruments, markers of hospitality as well as sustenance. A child tugs at your sleeve, asking for a bite. You break off a piece, and the dense, chewy interior yields easily. The flavor is simple yet satisfying, a reminder that some foods travel far but remain comforting. You can almost taste the history of Germany folded into each twist: the monastery kitchens, alpine valleys, and guild disputes all compressed into a small, salty knot. Elsewhere in the village, barrels of pretzels are traded alongside other staples. Some are hardened for long trips, others soft for immediate consumption. In this small town, pretzels connect people across distances and generations, creating community through shared taste. And there's a humorous side, of course. Teenagers dare each other to wear pretzels around their necks at festivals, echoing ancient Alpine superstitions. Some swear the bigger the pretzel necklace, the luckier the wearer in love. History repeats itself, oddly edible and oddly fun. By the time you leave the village, the sun is dipping behind rolling hills, the scent of half-baked pretzels lingering on the breeze. You feel the weight of culture, migration, and innovation all in the simple twist of dough, imagining that every bite you've taken carries a story stretching from Europe to the New World and beyond. You move into the early 19th century, the air thick with smoke and the clatter of machinery. Factories hum along cobblestone streets, their brick walls scarred with soot, and the scent of baking pretzels now mingles with the industrial tang of iron and coal. Here, the humble hand-twisted dough begins a new chapter: mass production, uniformity, and the roar of ovens larger than entire kitchens. The mainstream fact is that the Industrial Revolution transformed pretzel production. Mechanical kneading, standardized ovens, and assembler line techniques allowed bakers to produce thousands of pretzels per day. No longer confined to monasteries, markets, or small-town ovens, pretzels could reach urban populations en masse. In places like Philadelphia and Cincinnati, factories churned out pretzels by the millions, making them an affordable and ubiquitous snack. You stroll along the factory floor, watching workers, mostly women and children, roll, twist, and salt pretzels at astonishing speed. The machines clank and hiss, belts spin, and the smell of baking dough fills the massive hall. Each pretzel is nearly identical. Perfect loops, evenly salted, crisp on the outside and soft inside. The human touch is still there, but it's now a supplement to the efficiency of industrial power. Here's a quirky detail. Some factories experimented with early conveyor belt dunking, submerging pretzels in lye or baking soda baths before firing. One baker allegedly tried electroplating pretzels with sugar glaze for extra sheen, though it was quickly abandoned after workers complained of sticking problems. Industrial innovation wasn't always elegant, it was messy, loud, and sometimes a little absurd. Historians still argue how much standardization altered the essence of the pretzel. Did industrial methods dilute the artistry of handmade twists, or did they democratize a beloved snack? Some purists claim nothing compares to a hand-rolled pretzel, while others argue mass production ensured survival and global reach. You can see both sides as you watch tray after tray slide into enormous ovens. Children scurry along the aisles, giggling as they test imperfect loops, while adults carefully monitor ovens with long wooden peels. Salt crystals sparkle under flickering gas lamps, and steam rises in rhythmic waves. You reach for a warm pretzel, and the familiar aroma floods your senses, comforting, almost nostalgic despite the mechanical chaos around you. In the factories, pretzels take on new shapes too. Soft varieties begin appearing alongside the hard, long-lasting kinds, and regional recipes are preserved through specialized production lines. A Cincinnati factory might produce buttery pretzels while Philadelphia sticks to salt-heavy classics. It's as if geography continues to influence tradition, even in the age of mechanization. You notice small decorations on some pretzels, stamped patterns signaling the bakery or factory. Branding becomes important, a way to distinguish one producer from another when shelves are lined with nearly identical loops. In a sense, pretzels evolve from humble sustenance into commercial iconography, foreshadowing modern snack marketing. You step outside the factory into the hum of city streets, warm pretzel in hand. Street vendors wait with baskets, offering fresh twists to passers-by, carrying on the centuries-old tradition of accessible, portable food. The industry may have grown gigantic, but the basic joy of tearing off a salted loop remains unchanged. And there's a subtle humor here. Despite all the mechanization, someone always sneaks a bite before it leaves the line, a timeless rebellion against rules and efficiency. Pretzels, it seems, retain their mischievous spirit no matter the era. You step out of the factory smoke and into a bright stadium, the smell of cut grass and roasted peanuts mingling with the unmistakable aroma of soft pretzels. The crowd roars, vendors shout, and somewhere nearby a hot dog explodes with mustard onto a fan's glove. Here, the pretzel leaves the realm of industrial kitchens and dining tables, staking its claim as a cultural icon, the unmistakable snack of baseball, beer, and all things Americana. The mainstream fact is that by the late 19th and early 20th centuries, soft pretzels had become a staple at American baseball parks. Vendors carried them in baskets slung over their shoulders, walking the aisles and calling out the timeless chant, "Get your pretzels here." The twist, soft and salty, became inseparable from the sounds of cracking bats and the smell of popcorn. It wasn't just food, it was part of the spectacle. You grab one from a vendor, warm and supple in your hands, and break off a corner. The soft interior gives way easily, the coarse salt sticking to your fingertips, and you realize how satisfying this ritual is. Bite, chew, hand over crumbs to the nearest child, repeat. The pretzel has become performance food, edible theater in a stadium-sized setting. Here's the quirky part. Some vendors perfected tricks to make the snack even more theatrical. One carried pretzels shaped like baseball bats. Another offered pretzels looped through the fingers like tiny rings to toss into the air. Spectators competed to see who could catch the pretzel thrown by the vendor, merging snack and sport in an entirely new form of amusement. Historians still argue whether pretzels became a staple at ballparks because of German immigrant influence or because the shape and portability simply suited the crowd. Did soft pretzels rise with baseball's popularity, or did baseball rise to embrace soft pretzels? The debate, like the snack itself, is twisted and satisfying. You wander down the row, chewing, and notice how vendors time their calls with the crack of the bat. There's a rhythm, a dance between game and snack. Some patrons dip pretzels into mustard, others into cheese sauce, while a few mischievously wrap them around their soda cups to carry extra loops. The pretzel adapts yet again, this time to entertainment and leisure. The beer garden outside the stadium adds another layer. Pretzels, previously symbols of fasting, superstition, or wealth, are now companions to ale and lager. You dip a piece into a frothy mug, the dough soaking up the liquid while maintaining its chew. It's a sensory pleasure centuries in the making, twists of dough now paired with centuries of brewing expertise. And humor creeps in naturally. Imagine a child trying to juggle 3 soft pretzels while dodging a flying hot dog. The scene would be chaotic, sticky, and unforgettable, much like baseball itself. Pretzels have become more than sustenance. They're part of the game, part of the spectacle, part of the shared culture. As the sun sets over the stadium, orange and pink streaking the sky, the crowd continues to munch, laugh, and cheer. The pretzel, soft and salty, loops through hands across generations. You realize it has survived not only centuries of kitchens, monasteries, and guilds, but now thrives in arenas of play, proving that a simple twist of dough can endure in every context imaginable. The cheers of the stadium fade behind you as you find yourself marching along a dirt road lined with soldiers, packs slung over shoulders, rifles clanking, and the occasional cannon boom echoing from distant hills. Here, pretzels have left the leisurely grounds of baseball and festivals and entered a grimmer, more utilitarian world: war rations. The mainstream fact is that pretzels, particularly hard varieties, became a staple for soldiers because of their durability. Unlike fresh bread that would spoil within days, pretzels could last weeks if stored correctly, making them ideal for marches, sieges, and naval campaigns. Armies from Europe to America carried them as essential rations, providing energy and comfort in otherwise grim circumstances. You watch a soldier bite down on a dense, salted twist, grimacing as he chews. The flavor is simple, the texture hard enough to work the jaw, but it fills a gap that hunger otherwise leaves. It's remarkable, in a way, how a snack invented in monasteries for children now sustains people in battle, silently bridging centuries of very different human experiences. Here's the quirky detail. Some soldiers reportedly used pretzels for non-dietary purposes. Crumbs were sometimes sprinkled into coffee to thicken it or softened in soup to stretch rations further. Others carved small pretzel pieces into charms, keeping them in pockets or under helmets as symbols of luck, echoing ancient superstitions. Pretzels, once spiritual and festive, now serve as both sustenance and superstition under the stress of combat. Historians still argue how widespread pretzel use was among armies. Some claim it was standard in most European regiments, while others suggest it was a localized practice, limited to regions with strong Germanic influence. The documentation is patchy, leaving researchers twisting through fragmentary evidence like dough on a board. You trudge along with the marching column, biting into another pretzel. You notice how its portability and toughness make it ideal. No crumbs to spoil, no fragile crust to crush under the weight of packs, and enough substance to keep soldiers moving. In a world of unpredictable logistics, it's a perfect solution. In one camp, a group of soldiers hangs pretzels from sticks to dry for later use, almost like miniature bread sculptures. You chuckle, imagining them arguing over whose pretzel will last longest, who twisted theirs more perfectly, or who gets to gnaw the first bite. Even in war, human behavior finds room for small rituals and pride. The scene shifts as the army marches further, encountering villages, rivers, and fields. Pretzels change hands, traded for water, bartered for small favors, or gifted to children along the way. The twist, you notice, transcends mere food. It becomes a portable connection between soldiers and civilians, a small comfort amid uncertainty. By the end of the day, as the column camps for the night, soldiers dip their pretzels into whatever liquid is at hand, soup, beer, or water, softening the crust and sharing stories. It's a quiet tradition, the same bread that survived guild rules, alpine rivalries, and stadium crowds now endures under tents and over campfires. The pretzel, it seems, thrives wherever humans go, even when the purpose is survival, and the stakes are life itself. Dawn breaks over a small 19th century European town, mist curling around the rooftops and chimneys sending spirals of smoke into the pale light. The streets are quiet, save for the occasional creak of a wagon wheel and the soft shuffle of early risers. You wander past bakeries already bustling with activity, where pretzels have begun their modern transformation, commercialization, branding, and inventive flavors that make the snack as much about novelty as tradition. The mainstream fact is that by the 19th century, pretzels had firmly entered mass culture beyond German-speaking regions. Urban bakeries across Europe, and eventually in America, began experimenting with larger varieties, sweeter doughs, and decorative toppings. They were no longer just daily sustenance, festival adornments, or portable provisions, they were marketable, desirable, and versatile products. You enter a bakery and observe trays lined with golden twists, some sprinkled with coarse salt, others coated with sugar and cinnamon. The baker offers you a piece of one flavored with poppy seeds, a nod to old traditions but with a modern twist. You notice how the aroma immediately evokes comfort, nostalgia, and curiosity simultaneously. Pretzels are no longer just bread, they're sensory experiences, edible invitations to memory and pleasure. A quirky side note, in some regions, pretzels were even shaped into letters, numbers, or miniature figurines for special occasions. Children's birthdays, political rallies, and religious holidays all found their edible expression through these twisted designs. Pretzels had become playful, interactive food. Imagine biting into your own initials, both thrilling and slightly humiliating if you're a slow eater. And of course, historians still debate the origins of some of these innovations. Did commercialization naturally evolve from folk practices, or did baker entrepreneurs deliberately invent novelty shapes to attract customers? Evidence is inconclusive, and it seems plausible that both forces worked in tandem, twisting the history of pretzels as deftly as a baker twists dough. You step outside into the bustling street. Vendors shout their specialties, townspeople haggle, and children dart between legs carrying sticky sweet pretzels. The snack has become a cultural connector, uniting social classes in shared appreciation. Soft and hard varieties sit side by side, old recipes preserved alongside new innovations. You taste a cinnamon sugar pretzel and savor the subtle blend of history and experimentation. Some quirky practices linger. In Bavaria, pretzels are still served with beer, but in Austria, you might find them as accompaniments to soups. Regional customs, you realize, are stubborn. They survive through centuries, migrations, wars, and festivals. You marvel at how a simple dough twist continues to adapt while remaining recognizable. By the time night falls, the town quiets again. Pretzels hang in window displays for the next morning, promising warmth and tradition to the next day's visitors. You can almost hear the centuries whispering from every loop and twist, from monastery kitchens to alpine festivals, from battlefield rations to stadium snacks. Pretzels have endured because humans find meaning in them. They nourish, delight, and connect us across time. You find yourself in a modern city, neon lights reflecting on wet pavement, the hum of cars, the chatter of pedestrians, and the distant clang of subway trains. Pretzels are everywhere: street-side carts, cafes, and even airport kiosks. The snack has become global, bridging centuries of history with every salty twist and sweet loop. Yet, despite its omnipresence, each bite still carries echoes of monks, guilds, explorers, and festival-goers. The mainstream fact is that pretzels today have evolved into a multifaceted snack culture. From soft, doughy varieties sold at fairs to hard, crunchy twists found in vending machines worldwide, pretzels have adapted to modern tastes and industrial production methods. They are no longer bound by regional rules or religious symbolism. They belong to anyone with a craving or a snack break. You stroll past a busy street cart, the vendor expertly looping dough into classic shapes while calling out, "Fresh pretzels, warm and salty." You bite into one, feeling the familiar crisp exterior give way to a soft interior, and realize that this simple combination of flour, water, and salt still evokes comfort, joy, and community in ways centuries of history have honed. Quirky details abound. You notice pretzels shaped like sports logos, chocolate-coated loops, and even tiny bite-sized pretzels used as ice cream toppings. Some cafes sell pretzel sandwiches filled with exotic cheeses or smoked meats. It's a far cry from monastic simplicity or battlefield rations, yet you see the same thread: pretzels adapt while maintaining their identity. Historians still argue whether these innovations dilute the essence of the pretzel or enhance it. Is it still the same snack if it's chocolate-dipped or stuffed, or has it become something entirely new? The debate mirrors centuries of adaptation. Pretzels have always changed, and perhaps that's their defining feature. You pause to observe a family sharing a pretzel, each pulling off sections, laughing as sugar and salt scatter. Nearby, a street musician taps a rhythm on a bucket, creating a soundtrack to the timeless act of communal eating. Pretzels are not just food, they are social glue, reminders of simple pleasures, cultural continuity, and human creativity. And here's a funny thought: in this era of hyper-processed snacks, people still pay a premium for something as old-fashioned as a handmade pretzel, oblivious that they are literally eating a centuries-old recipe perfected by monks, bakers, and immigrants. The loop has survived famine, war, religion, industry, and commercialization, yet somehow, the most important test remains: do you like the crunch? As you wander further, you realize that pretzels have touched nearly every facet of life. They are snacks, symbols, charms, and art. They've crossed oceans, endured battles, and found homes in stadiums, festivals, and street corners worldwide. And through all of this, they maintain their simple, twisted shape, comforting, reliable, endlessly adaptable, and quietly magical. The night deepens, and the city's neon glow softens as streetlights flicker on one by one. You find yourself walking slowly, the crunch of your pretzel beneath your fingers fading into the rhythm of your steps. The scents of ovens and salt linger faintly in the air, ghosting through the alleys, reminding you of centuries of hands twisting dough, of monks, bakers, travelers, and festival-goers, all connected by this simple loop. The pace of your journey slows with each breath. You notice the distant hum of traffic and the occasional laugh echoing from a nearby cafe. Everything feels more gentle, more expansive. The pretzel, once a tool of survival, a symbol of faith, and a marker of identity, now drifts into memory, the edges softening like clouds at sunset. Each knot carries stories you've traveled through tonight: rituals, superstition, commerce, war, migration, and they settle quietly in your mind, like crumbs of comfort. You imagine the hands of children in alpine valleys, monks in silent cloisters, soldiers on stormy seas, and modern street vendors all shaping, baking, and sharing the same humble bread. It stretches across time and space, connecting moments of hope, endurance, joy, and play. There is a soothing rhythm in this continuity, a reminder that even the simplest objects can hold the weight of human experience without ever speaking a word. Your eyes grow heavy, and the city lights blur into gentle halos. The twists and loops of the pretzel echo in your mind like a soft lullaby, familiar and unhurried. There is a calmness in imagining that, despite centuries of change, this small bread has endured, adapting yet remaining recognizable, resilient yet tender. You take a final, slow bite, savoring both flavor and history, feeling yourself fold gently into the story as if you belong to it too. The world outside fades into quiet. You breathe in, feel the warmth of shared tradition, and allow yourself to drift, the salty, comforting loops of the pretzel wrapping around your thoughts. Tonight, you've traveled far and wide, across oceans, festivals, monasteries, and factories. Now, all that energy, history, and flavor settle down like a soft blanket. And with that, your mind eases, the story loops seamlessly back into gentle dreams.